Good day, everyone. Good day, ma'am. For today's topic, I'm going to tackle about the developed work plan for food and beverage production and service. So, what comes in your mind when you heard about work plan? So, basically, a work plan is a document that outlines the steps needed to complete a project or achieve a goal. So if we are doing certain goals, we need to make a work plan, right? For example, natay mga get-togethers tomorrow. So dayon na pud tay schedule sa afternoon. So we need to write down all the plan nato in a sheets so that dili na to siya malimtan. So work plan is a document nga nag-outlines tanan sa step nga imuhang need nga himuon in that certain day. But you need to remember that work plan is also kanang mga steps pod nga need nimo nga i-complete within a day. So that's what work plan is. So I'm going to discuss to you what the work plan for food, beverage, production, and services. Certainly, the actual preparation and production of food items for service session should be based on planning. This section defines the workflow sheet, or also known as work plan, in the context of kitchen and bar operations. The workflow sheets are used and provide advice regarding their development. So, in preparing a food and beverage is need yun gyapon siya og work plan. So, everything is need to be planning. Defining workflow sheets or work plans. A workflow sheets or work plan is an action plan for a session and features the following. Number 1 is a sequential list of all the tasks which need to be done for a specific food production service session. Second is a series of timelines identifying when activities should start and the time they need to be completed in order to achieve a required outcomes for the session. Third is the allocation of task or work to identify stop and or sections. So number 1 is it talks so this work plan is kanang nana din ni na features tanan, which is number 1 is kanang dapat sa imong work plan is na kay mga list sa mga task nga need siya ma-done in a specific food production service session. So for example, namoy food production session today. So tanang task nga required nga ma-done this day is na dito sa workflow sheets. Second is a series of timelines identifying when activities should start. So, sa mga workflow sheets na features po dito kung ang mga series of timelines nga sa tanan nimong activities nga when siya ma-start or when kung kano siya ma-complete in order to achieve it. And lastly, an allocation of task work to the individual stop or section. So, sa mga workflow sheets is naka-features po dito ang mga lain-lain nga mga works sa mga staff kung asa sila na assign. Reasons to use work plan sheets, work plans. Kitchen develop workflow sheets or work plans in order to number 1 is help ensure all necessary food preparation and production work for a service session can be completed as required to enable timely food service. Second is integrate the wide variety of kitchen activities into a cohesive whole. Number 3 is allocate work to nominated kitchen sections and or employees. Fourth is optimize efficiency and productivity. And schedule and prioritize work necessary to achieve the required outcomes for the session. Verify the required work can be completed in that time available. Identify potential problems with timing and sequencing of food preparations and production activities and requirements. So, ang mga reasons to make a work plan sheets sa kitchen is nagdevelop siya just to help ensure all necessary food preparation and production. So the reasons why we have work plan is to ensure nga tanang food preparation and production work is kanang na-complete na siya timely sa pag-production pa lang sa mga foods. Second is to integrate the whole variety in a cohesive whole. So muna siya ikanang reasons nga natay work plan is nakabutang dito sa work plan nimo nga tanang kitchen activities nimo is mausa lang nimo sila tan-aw ba sa imong mga task nga need to required. And third is allocate work to nominated. So sa imong workplace as what I discussed earlier is kanang naka-allocate na dito kung unsay mga positions or mga asa na assign nimo mga employees. Then sa imong workplace naka-optimize good imong efficiency and productivity. Then sa imong schedules, sa imong mag-priority ka sa imong necessary nga work nga dapat ma-achieve nimo sa isa ka session. Then mag-verify kag required work nga ma-complete sa time and identify potential problems with timing and sequencing of food preparation. So that's the reason of having a work plan sheets or workflow sheets. Preferring workflow sheets or work plans. Not all kitchens prefer or use workflow sheets or work plans. Some kitchens operate effectively on the basis of verbal advice, instructions given to staff by the head chef at the staff briefing prior to the commencement of work. Where workflow sheets or work plans are preferred, the following factors should be considered. Number 1 is watch more experienced staff preferred workflow sheets before you prefer your first examples. Ask them why they planned the way they did and what they took to account. Learn from their experience and ask them to review your initial attempts. Second is, you should prepare the worksheets by working backwards. That is, you begin with the service times for dishes, meals, and calculate the time needed to prepare, produce menu items, working backgrounds to determine when tasks need to commence in order to complete work on time. Lastly is all components of all dishes listed in the menu for the session must be covered by the planned workflow sheets. This includes preparation of freshly made cooked food as well as reconstitution, reheating of previously cooked food. So all of this talks about how to prepare the workflow sheets. So number one is you need to watch more experienced staff kung unsa ang preferred sa workflow sheets. So i-ask them kung kabalo ba sila mo himong workflow sheets before ka mohatag og examples sila ha. So kanang mag-base mo sa experience and ask them to review your initial attempts. Second is, you should prepare the sheets by working background. That is, you begin with the service time. So, to make a workflow sheets, dapat is, you prepare the sheets by working backgrounds. Working backwards. So, that is, kanang magbigin ka sa, kung sa service time sa dishes ug sa meals, dayon, i-calculate nimo ang time sa prepared or pag-produce ana nga menu. Dayon makomplete nimo ang work on time. So lastly is all component of all dishes listed on the menu. So for the session must be covered by the work plan. So what I've said is kanang dapat ang tanang mga kanang himuonin nimo within that session is dapat nakalisted siya. Then na-covered siya sa work plan so that kanang nag-include siya kung how giunsa nimo pag-prepared freshly made cooked foods, dayon kung unsa po nimo gi-reconstitution or gi-reheat na nga previous cooked food. Develop every workflow sheets so as to Number 1 is meet the needs of the individual upcoming session. You have to take into account factors that apply to each session. It is advisable to try to create generic workflow sheet. Second is avoid production bottlenecks. That is, do not overload individual stop or sessions. Avoid placing too much demand at the one time on the one item of equipment. And third is identify the resources to be used available for each task in terms of, for example, the staff, equipment, and recipes. And include specific constraints or required parameters which apply to the activity, such as, for example, time, special requirements, requests to cater for nominated dietary, cultural, religious, or other lifestyle food preferences. Last is file all workflow sheets so that they are available for future reference. So all of this is muna siya kanang to develop every workflow sheets. So it talks about the needs to meet the individual upcoming session, then avoid production bottlenecks, so do not overload individual staff. So dapat dili ni overload imong staff sa tanang mga buhatonon, and avoid placing too much demand at the one time. Identify the resources to be used. And lastly, kanang file all workflow sheets so they are available for future reference. So all the workflow sheets na nahimo is dapat ikanang itabi na lang na so that napay future reference, napay magamit for the future. Communicating with production team. Effective communication is a vital prerequisite in any successful kitchen. This section discusses the context of communication in a kitchen, identifies communication options, presents important aspects of communication, and describes common topics for kitchen communication. The context of communication. The context of communicating team members are in accordance to team units of production and the need to collaborate information both downward and upward. Ways of implementing communication. The production team. The production team is anyone involved in preparing, producing, and plating food, as well as those who support those activities, such as staff engaged in purchasing, receiving, storing, and issuing food, cleaning food areas and equipment, washing crockery, cutlery, pots, and pans. So here you can know how to communicate in kitchen. So number 1 is the communicating with production team. So we all know that communication is really important. So the context of communication is kanang so that sinabtanay mo in a kitchen and how you will produce or create your foods. Sa production team is kanang it involves communicating kung unsaon ninyo pag-prepared, pag-produce, o pag-plating sa mga food. Then as well as those who support those activities, such as the staff nga nag-engage sila sa purchase sa mga ingredients, receiving, storing, and issuing foods. Dayon they also involved sa cleaning food areas and equipment, then washing sa mga utensils, mga anything nga nagamit ninyo ng kitchen. Why business operations need to communicate? In kitchen, there is need for scheduled communication and ongoing communication. Scheduled communication is regular communication, such as number 1 is briefing with staff before work shifts commence, debriefing with staff after the service production session, staff meetings, weekly, monthly, all of staff's sessions. Ongoing communication occurs during the shift session and may involve updates regarding changes to plans, requirements previously notified due to, for example, unexpected demand, equipment breakdown, or changes to arrangement requested by customers. on-the-job coaching to provide practical training, general supervisory management activities such as responding to questions, monitoring work, providing advice, guidance, and direction, and feedback about progress, work which has been completed, and customer satisfaction levels, complaints, and compliments. So, it says here why business operations need to communicate. So, it's really need to communicate everywhere, especially in the kitchen. So, in scheduled communication is nana siya kanang need to communication, which is briefing, kanang i-briefing nimo imong staff before the shift commence, or dayon debriefing, kanang i-briefing na po nimo sila next about sa service production session, dayon staff meeting weekly and monthly. Then ang ongoing communication is nag-occurs ni siya is during shift session. Na-involves ni siya updating regard the changes, kanang updates sa changes or requirements nga previously notified due to unexpected demand, then employment breakdown. Then ang on-the-job coaching is to provide practical training. Then ang feedback, need na to nga communication, which is the feedback, so that we all know the customer satisfaction kung naba sila yung mga complaints or compliments. Communication options. In the kitchen, two types of communications are commonly used, such as written communication and verbal communication. Written communication includes paper-based and electronic information. For example is SOPs, work instructions. Muna siya kanang gitawag nga setting out procedures and protocols. Checklist, production sheets, work schedules, rosters and time sheets, workflow sheets, standard recipes, food purchasing, specifications. Ang verbal communication is muna siya kanang spoken language, either directions, advice, orders, questions, and others. Supplemented by body language, nonverbal communication. The fact the kitchen can often be a noisy and hectic environment has given rise to the use of range of hand signals to support and or replace verbal communication in some instances. So we already know what is verbal and non-verbal communication. So ang verbal mo siya kanang nag-use ka ay kanang verbal is kanang nag-use kag tone. For example, nakikistorya kag one-on-one sa imong kaistorya. So that's what ay kanang ang verbal communication mo na siya nag-involve sa kanang noisy, na siya noisy tone. Then while ang non-verbal is wala siya tone. So ang verbal communication kanang more na siya nag-spoken kag about sa mga direction, mga advice mo na siya verbal communication. While ang non-verbal communication mo na siya kanang mga written, more siya written, for example written kanang mga purchasing mo na siya mga non-verbal communication. Important aspects of communication. In relation to communication, it is vital to realize the following important points. Communication is a two-way process. Feedback is the critical element that completes the communication process by turning a monologue into a dialogue. So, in a communication, mag-ends jud ta sa feedback. For example, you are talking to someone. So, in the end of your conversation, naadyo na siya feedback. For example, kanang naghatag kog speech. And so people can have a feedback about sa imong speech sa ilaha. Because without a feedback, communication is incomplete. So, just because you have spoken to a staff member does not mean they have heard you or will respond as you want or expect them to. So, as what I've said, if you're communicating through verbal. So it doesn't mean nga ang imong giistoryan is nakasabot sila or they heard you say the word or you and they want you to respond to them as you want or expected to. So in communication kanang dapat mag-ensure ta sa feedback because kanang naay sometimes nga nag-communicate ka even though wala sila na kasabot or wa nila na dungog imong kwan. So there's no feedback, di ba? Second is just because you have given staff written information does not mean they have read it or understood it or will implement what is required. So it says nga it doesn't mean nga nag-write kag information doesn't mean nga na-read nila tong information and also nakasabot sila. So it also really need nga na jud kanang kasabot jud nga to ang gihatagan sa to ang message. There is a need to create a working environment where there is a free, open, honest, and timely communication. This is the single biggest challenge facing all kitchens. Many staff need to be encouraged to communicate because they are unfamiliar and are uncomfortable with a work situation when their opinion is valued or actively sought. So, if you are new to that working place, so you really need to encourage the staff nimo nga mag-communicate because they are in unfamiliar environment. So dili pa sila comfortable anay lahang working place. So it's really need to encourage the staff to communicate. Second is many kitchens employed workers from different language backgrounds and with varying levels of language skills. Not all staff will necessarily speak your language or the same language. So tanan bitong establishment kanang nag-employed sila mga person nga na sila yung mga language background. So na jud sila dili pagkakaintindihan because they have a language barrier. So don't expect them nga even though nag-employed sila sa imuhang establishment doesn't mean nga maka-speak pud sila sa imuhang language. And the third is written communication may need to be provided in more than one language. So ang written communication when you are working into if na kay kanang employee nga nag-speak pug laing language, so dapat ang imong written communication is naka-written pud sa ilahang language so that makasabot pud sila sa imong trying to convey. And verbal communication may need to be given in different languages for it to have optimal effectiveness. So as what I've said, need siya nga ang imong communication is need pud siya nga nasa different languages. So for example, talk kag English din ang imong employee na wala siya kasabot og English, dapat ang imong ibutang pud sa imong verbal communication or sa imong strategy or sa imong instruction. For example, naghatag kag instruction in English language, so dapat napo ka instruction in Tagalog or Bisaya instruction so that ang imo employee nga di kasabot og English is makasabot pud sila. There are often barriers to communication other than language in the kitchen, and this must be accommodated. Examples include noise, distraction of work, need to concentrate on tasks, workers, blocking views. So ang barriers to communication dili lang kay ang language. It is also the noise. For example, you are working dayon na-distract ka siya noise. So it is really an example of barriers in language, so barriers in communication. So it is barriers in communication, dili lang kay ang language nga barriers siya. For example, dili siya kasabot sa imong language, dili lang kay kana ang barriers. It also the noise nga maka-distract sa imong work. That is also the barriers in communication. Common topics for kitchen communication. In a kitchen environment, communication will often related to the following indicators. Number 1 is allocated task for individual staff and sections. would, for example, emphasizes on sequencing, prioritizing, resources available, standards, and quality. So, I've already discussed about allocated tasks. Muna siya ka ng giving staff each task for the each section. So, include na niyang sequencing, prioritizing, muna siya. And second is timing requirements, which can refer to service times, timing requirements, service times, updates regarding delays and or changes to planned service times schedule, delays with expected delivery of goods in. Food orders received from wait staff servers, including dish numbers, timing of service, special guest requests for individual customers, and service protocols in relation to service styles, plating requirements, timing. Lastly, responses to complaints and other situations requiring service recovery. Muna siya ka ng common topics for kitchen communication.